So what we have here is a Atari PC1 ISA expansion adapter. So this turns the J2 and J8 headers into the standard 62-pin slot connector that we'll find on an IBM PC, XT or compatible. So you can see here we have on the right hand side we've got the J8 connector. Over on the left hand side we've got the J2 connector, pins 1 and 2 at the top going down to pins 49 and 50 at the bottom. Here at the back of the board we've got a right angled 62 pin ISA connector. There isn't enough room inside the PC1 to have the boards standing upright, so they have to be installed parallel to the card in order to get the case lid back on. Over on the right hand side, the J2 and J8 pins don't actually carry any power, they are only data lines only. And the IBM PC 62-pin connector has voltage on several of those pins. So in order to get that, we've got a sort of standard 3.5-inch peripheral connector here down the lower right. And we can splice this into the power supply of the PC1, or in fact we can power that externally if you have any cards that are a high-draw card. The standard PC1 power supply probably doesn't have a lot of spare capacity on it to drive additional options. I have an Exos power supply inside my PC1 which does have a certain amount of additional capacity in it, but it's not a lot, so I definitely would recommend, if you're going to use this, that you steer towards the modern low draw cards that use the very efficient circuitry on them. Try not to use the much older cards with the old TTL logic on them. They will have a higher power draw. You'll also notice down here we've got a few more components. This jumper here actually turns on and off the 12-volt power line coming from the connector right here. That's me just being cautious. I've been burned by 12 volts on old computers before. I've managed to get it connected the wrong way. I've blown ICs before. So if you leave this pin unconnected, the 12-volt pin is no longer active, and you know, it's going to be a little bit more tolerant of mistakes, or if you've bridged a solder joint or got something installed slightly incorrectly. That just lets you get the thing working correctly before you actually go ahead and turn on the 12-volt line, which could be catastrophic if it was wired up in the wrong way. These three components here, we've got an IC, which is an LT1054CP, and 3 capacitors surrounding it. What this is doing is it is generating the negative 12-volt line. So here we've got 5 volts at the top, and you see we've got it right here on the silk screen as well, plus 5 volts in red. This is really me being super cautious, making sure I get things plugged in the right way around. We've got 12 volts at the bottom here on the yellow. The PC connector does have a negative 12-volt line, which originally was provided by the PC's power supply. That doesn't exist in a PC1, so this device will actually invert the power on that 12-volt line and create a negative 12-volt line, which is needed for most sound cards. The Sound Blasters, the Ad-Libs, even the modern implementations of them still rely on plus 12 volts and negative 12 volts to actually function. So if this is not present, you would have to find some other way of bringing in that negative 12-volt line, or in fact you wouldn't be able to use those sound cards. Note there is no negative 5-volt line on this card. It's not implemented. The connectors are not connected to anything. Very few modern cards need negative 5 volts. I haven't found any. The older cards, the older sound cards did use it. So if you have one of those older sound cards, it's probably not going to work in this case. But quite honestly, those older sound cards will be so huge they probably wouldn't fit anyway. So anyway, just letting you know that there is no negative 5-volt line on this card. You'll notice we've got some capacitor silks here on the screen. I was hoping to be able to find some very low profile ceramic capacitors to act as decoupling caps on the voltage lines here. I could not find anything in the end that would work, that would lie flat enough to allow a card to sit in this slot, so I've actually left them off. And in fact I have put the decoupling caps, these are 10 microfarad caps here on the 5-volt lines at the top of the card. The card seems to run perfectly fine without them. A lot's going to depend on the actual expansion cards that you're using. I didn't have a problem not with these caps in, but I decided to put them in anyway just as a test. and they seem to work. I'm going to run off a new version of this card that actually has space for the caps down the sides, and I'm going to implement that in the next release. But this version, you can either sort of do this botch job that I've done here, or in fact you can probably just get away with leaving them off completely. Now if you flip the card upside down, you will notice that there is a second ISA slot here on the bottom, basically the mirror image of the one on the top. This allows us to plug two cards in at once. This slot, of course, is extremely limited. We've got the pinner headers here on the left and the right, and so we haven't got a lot of side-to-side movement here, a lot of room either side. And also remember that the disk drive will be here at the back. So this is a very, very small space, but it does actually have enough room to allow us to install an xt-ide card. Now this is a very, very compact version of the xt-ide. Some of the smaller ones will slot in here. As I say, this one is probably the smallest. This was from Blue Lava Systems, and they actually helpfully included a 64 megabyte flash card in here, which is pre-formatted with DOS 6.2, so that certainly made life pretty simple. That sits in there like that. Like I said, some of the other larger cards will also go in here, but anything obviously that that goes slightly to the left here is not going to work. Anything particularly tall, or anything that has a lot of components that stand proud, because you'll notice on this card I put double headers, right? So I've actually double stacked the headers, and you need this to sit cleanly on those headers on the board, and then it will sit properly in the PC1 without creating an issue. If without those extra headers, you would actually be squashing components and causing some problems for yourself. Now on the top here, I've also decided to implement a little shielding here. It really, I'm not sure if it's necessary or not. These slot adapters are fairly stiff. The cards are fairly small and light. They do tend to stand proud on their own, but there's always a chance that when you put the lid on that you're going to get some push down. And of course, as I said, I'm always concerned about that 12-volt line potentially touching something that it shouldn't. So I put that on there. This is just an anti-static bag that I've cut up and used some electrical tape to create this this little insulating layer for myself, just in case things go wrong. And then here we have a OPL3 card, which is a AdLib and Sound Blaster compatible card. This one came from Texelec, and they make a couple of different versions of this card. This will work on a PC XT, and with the right software drivers, it will actually give you a AdLib compatible sound experience on the PC1. So there we go. We've got the AdLib card on the top. We have the xt-ide on the bottom. And next we are going to install this in the PC1.